On the motion to court a priority, I call the member for Baulkham Hills.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. Mr Acting Speaker, this House notes the tough decisions are required to fix New South Wales for 16 years of incompetent Labor rule. Mr Acting Speaker, I have the fortune to come from northwestern Sydney, not far from where my friend the member for Toongabbie lives. But Mr Speaker, the tragedy of living in northwestern Sydney, the tragedy about living in northwestern Sydney is that we have not been neglected by any government more than we've been neglected by the New South Wales Labor government, which was quite rightfully thrown out of power on the 26th of March 2011. Mr Acting Speaker, what happened in northwestern Sydney when it comes to rail is a Shakespearean tragedy. It's a tragedy of Greek proportions. We have been promised a railway.
Shakespeare or Greek?
Well, both. We have been promised a railway 3, if not 4 times in the 16 years that the Labor government was in rule. In fact, Mr Speaker, in my office, Mr Acting Speaker, in my office, I've got a front page of the Hills News, which is dated 1985, of which, Mr Acting Speaker, the then Planning Minister, the Honourable R.J. Carr, Minister for Planning under the former the Rand government, announced a North West Rail link. He announced that we were going to get a train to Castle Hill in 1985. That was after the Labor government of the Lane area ripped up the tracks that went from Parramatta to Castle Hill. I don't know what it is about the Labor Party and trains to the northwest, but they just don't stick to their promises. Mr Acting Speaker, this government will take that tough decision and will build a railway. It will build a railway to the northwestern Sydney so that the member for Hawkesbury and I can get a nice air-conditioned train into Parliament in years to come.
That's what you want to enhance that?
Mr Acting Speaker, infrastructure above and beyond the North West Rail has been a tragedy over the last 16 years of Labor rule. I know that because for the last 8 years I've been an industry advocate. I've worked in the tourism fraternity and I've worked in the civil construction for the Civil Contractors Federation. You will not find 2 industries more neglected by Labor than those 2 industries. Infrastructure tourism in New South Wales was totally neglected by the New South Wales Labor government. They've been promised railways to regional New South Wales, they've been promised runways in regional New South Wales, they've been promised convention centres, they've been promised everything that the New South Wales Labor government could think of in order to get re-elected. What did they get delivered? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The Civil Contractors Federation, of which I was I had the fortunate position of being the CEO for the last 3.5 years, Mr Acting Speaker. I sat there as that CEO and watched promise after promise denied us. We would turn up and speak to ministers, of which would have turning over quite regularly. Ministers in the previous Labor government just couldn't really stick to their brief, unfortunately, because they had various members of that previous Labor government that thought cabinet positions were like lollipops and they could be handed around and rewarded to members of the previous government accordingly. We had been promised time after time for an improvement in infrastructure in New South Wales. We'd been promised projects only to have them withdrawn or walked away when there was a change in in ministry. It was appalling. It was an absolute appalling situation which led to a complete lack of confidence in industry in New South Wales, which led to a decline in investment in New South Wales. And more importantly, as everybody knows, when there's no investment, when there's no demand for products and services, there is a drop in employment. And if anybody unemployed in New South Wales needs to point the finger about why they're out of work, they only need to point the finger to that side of the house. Because it was the Labor Party, when they were in government, that denied this state so many opportunities. So many opportunities just went walking out the door. Yep. They went to Queensland, they went to Abu Dhabi, they went to New Zealand, they went anywhere but the state of New South Wales because there was no confidence. There was no confidence in the quality of ministers. There was no confidence in the tenure of ministers. There was no confidence in the decision-making process and whether a decision that was announced in this very chamber one day would be honoured on the next day. It was a disgraceful situation, and a situation that has been quite rightly rectified by the electorate on the 26th of March 2011. Mr Acting Speaker, one of these tough decisions that we're going to make revolves around taxes and charges, and it revolves around the level of salaries and wages that the state are in a position to pay. Members on the opposite, Mr Acting Speaker, seem to think that we don't want to give pay rises, which is an appalling, which is the most insulting statement that I think anybody can make. Right. Who on this side of the chamber, who on this side of the chamber doesn't want to give nurses a 20% pay rise? Who on this side of the chamber doesn't want to give police a 20% pay rise? We would all love to give police, teachers, nurses, anybody that works in the state sector, particularly the services sector, pay rises. But the fact of the matter is, unlike those in the Labor government, we believe in fiscal responsibility. We're not like the Whitlam government. We can't just go out and print more money and hand it around because we want to look like good people. We just can't do it.
Those were the days.
I mean, this side of the House, Mr Acting Speaker, this side of the House is preoccupied with carbon taxes. They're also preoccupied with another carbon copy. They want to be a carbon copy of the federal Labor government in Canberra, and I can tell you the people of New South Wales won't cop it. They can't afford it, and they won't cop it. Mr Acting Speaker, these tough decisions are decisions that are going to be made by this government. They're not going to be made lightly. They're going to be made in full consultation with the people of New South Wales. They'll be made in full consultation with other stakeholders in the various portfolios we need to fix up and address. Mr Acting Speaker, I believe the House needs to note that these tough decisions are required to fix this state after 16 years of Labor and confidence. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
On the question of the motion accorded priority be agreed with, I call the member for Balcombe Hills in reply.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. The question for you, Mr Acting Speaker, is, having listened to those on the other side, if they were so good, why did they lose the election? Yeah. I mean, that's the question we ask ourselves. These guys have been standing up as if how great they were for the last 16 years, and yet the people of New South Wales even made the member for
Order. The members on the opposition bench have had their opportunity. The member for Balcombe Hills is in reply and will be heard.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. I find it extraordinary that members opposite will stand up and espouse their qualifications to govern, but certainly espouse the quality of government that we saw for the last 16 years. I mean, we really should be calling the member for Toongabbie Rubberman, because he comes up with rubbery figures of which I don't think I've ever seen. But the previous speaker, the member for Kiera, has the hide to stand in here. The member for Kiera has the hide to stand in here and talk to us about deals with members of the upper house. I mean, is that not the height of hypocrisy for a Labor member in New South Wales, particularly one from the Labor right, to stand up here and talk about deals? I mean, for the last 8 years as an industry advocate, all I saw was members of the Labor Party, when they were sitting here, sign off on deals. They signed off on deals with the unions in return for donations. They signed off on deals. You know all about it, mate, because you've been the beneficiary of them. They signed off on deals with industry associations, some of whom I was disgusted with. They've signed off on deals with industries right around New South Wales in return to get back in power. In the words of Graham Richardson, they were in it for anything, and whatever it took to keep in power, they were going to keep in power. But after 16 years, fortunately for us, the people of New South Wales saw right through it. Mr Acting Speaker, they are living in Disneyland if they think that the tough decisions that we're going to make are decisions that we couldn't just get away with not making. Mr Acting Speaker, we have in New South Wales now a government We have in New South Wales now a government that is prepared to face facts. If we had gone on the way that the New South Wales Labor Party had managed New South Wales, and in many respects, Mr Acting Speaker, it wasn't that much dissimilar to what we saw under Hawke and Keating for the years leading up to the 1996 election, which we saw the Labor Party in federally go south, the way that it should have gone. New South Wales has quite rightfully and luckily seen the light as well. We can't go down, we just can't continue the Labor way. There is no such thing as a free lunch. New South Wales Labor thought that they were going to be able to give pay rises, but New South Wales Labor thought that for the next another 10 years we were going to be able to give 10% pay rises per annum, and that they weren't going to be accountable for their decisions. Decisions, might I add, Mr Acting Speaker, which include the CBD Metro at $1 million. You know very well, the member for Kiera knows very well, because him and I sat in the same rooms when it was being discussed. At $1 million a metre, Mr Acting Speaker. $1 million a metre. We were going to get in New South Wales a CBD Metro which was going to service the people of the inner city who could walk, catch buses, catch their cycle, catch ferries, and had a main rail and had a heavy rail network.
What was his job?
I do not understand what the member for what the previous Labor government thought that they were going to achieve by building an underground railway at $1 million a meeting when there were 4 or 5 other transport options. Meanwhile, up in the northwest of Sydney, Mr Acting Speaker, Mr Deputy Speaker, where I'm from, we were neglected once again. But it's not just the Sydney Metro, Mr Acting Speaker. It wasn't just the Sydney Metro. They thought that they were going to be able to introduce an industrial relations system that they were never going to have to implement. They thought that they could stand up and promise pay rises in return for contributions and for more efficiencies out of the state public sector. But listen, those efficiencies in the public sector, Mr Acting Speaker, we'll just leave them on the negotiation table, but we'll never make our friends in the union movement have to honour them. We'll never have to worry about it. We'll just keep giving you your pay rises. It was the type of economic managing that have seen country after country, state after state, go into disrepair and disregard. Mr Acting Speaker, I'm horrified.
Order. I call the House to order. There's too much audible conversation going on. Now, the member for Cogra, the time has expired. Was that your point of order?
No, I had one. I could go on with it if you like.
The question is that the motion accorded priority be agreed with. All of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no.
No.
I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.